So welcome back to my podcast where I cover the Idaho4 case, or the case against Bryan Kohberger. And I go by the name Swamp Rose, and let's get right into it. Today we're talking about secret investigations into Bryan Kohberger. And there's actually been quite a few secret investigations into Bryan Kohberger done in the shadows of this case. So you might be asking, well, how can they be secret investigations and we still know about them? And the reason we know about these secret investigations, so there's a couple of reasons we know about these secret investigations. Now, one of them is because information was leaked to the mainstream media in this case. There's also glances at the secret investigations in the court documents and alluded to by expert witnesses and investigators on the stand. At times, this can make me feel like Bryan Kohberger's his constitutional rights are being set aside. So let's start by focusing on the most current paperwork in this case. So first I want to show you the court summary page, and you can see they have uploaded new documents. So what I want to do is I want to focus on this particular subpoena. It was accompanied by another supplemental request for discovery. So if you're counting, that makes over 20 requests that have been made over the past 2 years for evidence from the defense of Bryan Kohberger. What's interesting about this subpoena is it's not a normal subpoena. If it's not answered, it can carry criminal charges against the prosecution and sanctions, which are already being pursued. As you can see, here's the sanction paperwork. So I'm going to read to you what the court posted as a definition to this powerful subpoena. So it's called a subpoena ducis tecum, a subpoena ordering the witness to appear in a court and bring specific documents, records, and things. Expert witnesses. On a written request of the defendant, the prosecutor must provide a written summary or report of any testimony that the state intends to introduce at trial or at a hearing pursuant to rules blah, 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 and to the Idaho rules of the evidence. The summary provided must describe the witness's opinions, the facts, the data for those opinions, and the witness's qualifications. Disclosure of expert opinions regarding mental health are also comply with these requirements of Idaho Code 18-207. The prosecution is not required to produce any materials not subject to the disclosure or other subsection G of this rule. The subsection does not require disclosure of expert witnesses, their opinions, and facts and data for those opinions or witness qualifications intended only for rebut evidence or theories that have not been disclosed under the rule prior to the task. All right, so I've read you that definition now. So in conjunction with this paperwork that has been filed, there's also these no contact orders. So this brings us to our first discussion of a secret investigation. This first one, I think without a doubt, we're going to be seeing this particular secret investigation discussed at trial. So at the very beginning of this case, Ann Taylor hired a private investigator to look into Bryan's defense. And I would imagine also to look into alternative suspects, which they did mention in the second disclosure for discovery that was made very early on in this case. So the investigator's name was Richard Batanti. He noted issues in a scathing document suggesting that there was no evidence against BK. He also subpoenaed the first floor roommate to testify on Bryan's behalf, where Batanti, in his own words, said the first floor roommate was to provide, and I quote, exculpatory and material evidence to Bryan Kohberger's defense. That hearing collided with another secret investigation. So that particular hearing coincided with another secret investigation, so this was going to be an argument about probable cause in court, but another secret investigation started, and a secret grand jury was convened who found enough evidence via Bryan Kohberger's cell phone and other circumstantial evidence to bring the case against Brian. And the hearing, as far as we know, was called off. In fact, we don't even know if the first floor roommate ever testified. It's all speculation at this point, but she was ordered to come into court. Now, what's interesting is we do have an idea of what this first floor roommate was going to say. Family members of the victims had commented on social media about the first floor roommate. We also heard accounts of the first floor roommate hearing multiple male voices and what sounded like a frat party spilling over from earlier in that night. We also heard accounts of a naked man running by the first floor roommate's window, and this happened right around the time of the crime. That was produced in a major news outlet called The Mirror, which is a foreign newspaper which the gag order wouldn't apply to. Now, whether the accounts are accurate or not, if this subpoena is regarding the first floor roommate, the subpoena Ducas Tecum I just read to you, it totally would explain why there's no contact orders. I personally can't think of a scenario where the first floor roommate doesn't testify to her eyewitness accounts. And because it's not just that her eyewitness accounts are listed in the PCA, her metadata is also listed in the PCA. And I think the no contact orders would certainly apply. So maybe this Ducas Tecum subpoena is for the first floor roommate. So when we're talking about the no contact orders, that kind of perfectly segues into our next secret investigation, which is the IGG, the investigative genetic genealogy. So in other words, that means finding a genetic match through tracing public records and family trees. So I had a little birdie tell me something about the IGG recently that I really want to share with my audience. And it makes me want to nickname the IGG the magic DNA, because after you hear this, you'll hear how the IGG is kind of magically invincible in the court of law in this case. So let me back up just a little bit, just to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. So to begin, the crime scene had 3 sources of unknown male DNA that were collected. None of these had matches in CODIS. One of these unknown samples was found on the buckle snap of the K-bar knife sheath that belongs to the alleged unaliving weapon. So listen, I'm only half joking when I call this magic DNA. Okay, so my joke about the magic DNA, let me explain this to you. So if we go to page 44 of the unredacted PCA authored by WSU Police Chief Don Daniels, you'll notice some interesting verbiage, and I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to read to you this whole statement about the IGG DNA. On December 28th, 2022, Idaho lab reported a DNA profile was obtained from the trash. It was compared to the suspect DNA profile. The lab personnel concluded that the source of the trash DNA profile was a male and was not being excluded as the biological father of the source of the suspect, and as 99.9998% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from this possibly being biological father or source of the suspect profile. Now, this is where things get tricky. The PCA goes on to have this really ambiguous language that we've been debating for a while, and I think I've cracked the code on it. It says, the information is being provided to the court pursuant of my duty and obligation to be fully candid with the court. I do not believe this information is exculpatory to the suspect. However, if the court believes this is exculpatory, then the court should consider this supplemental disclosure for evaluation of the existence of probable cause or lack thereof. But I am specifically asking the court not to consider this supplemental disclosure for evidence supporting the existence of probable cause. The reason for this request is that if the DNA test results are held inadmissible at some point, such a ruling would not impact the finding of probable cause for the warrant, so long as the court satisfied with the probable cause, regardless of the DNA test results. Let me tell you what's going on here, guys. This language seems to be a loophole that law enforcement uses in case they did something that could get the probable cause affidavit thrown out, the probable cause for arrest. What I've been told is that oftentimes police will leave out certain pieces of evidence from PCA. That way, if it's thrown out, they still have some evidence they can bring against their client. But in this case, when you take the IGG and you use it for evidence, but you say it's not evidence, what you're doing is you're using it to influence the judge and the biases to the judge saying, oh no, we really got this guy. Look, here's the DNA. That does have flaws and issues. I mean, IgG is the equivalent to a lie detector test. Essentially, the FBI could find the genetic genealogy profile, but all they could ever do is turn to MPD and say, this is who we suspect. Now go find a reason to arrest him because this isn't enough. But in this case, it's trying to tell us that please use the DNA. But if you throw out the case, let's pretend we didn't use it and let's not throw it out. So when you have this rhetorical language, it can be argued in court, we didn't use the DNA. This is setting it up if they made a mistake. That's what a little birdie told me. I'd love to know and again, that's all speculation in my opinion. And but I'd love to hear your opinion down below. A couple notes about this probable cause affidavit from Don Daniels. It started out as like a 16-page document from MPD. So their entire investigation of the 1122 King Road home and all of their evidence was only like 16 pages. But when Don Daniels got her hands on it to search the apartment and the offices, it turned into a 166-page document. And I don't know. I'd love to hear any thoughts you have about that too. I brought up those no contact orders, and I brought up this subpoena ducis tecum. If it applied to the IGG, what they're saying is there isn't a protective order against the IGG itself. The IGG is a file. It's protection against the people whose names were used in the family tree. So when it comes to IGG, if there's protective orders on it, or there is some sort of subpoena ducis tecum, it's not to actually protect the family tree or the document, because that's what the IGG itself is, not a person that can have no contact orders or be a confidential informant. But each of the people who are involved in the public records or the family tree, those are the people that would be the confidential informants. And so no contact orders, if they applied to this, they would be for those people. Okay, so when we're talking about the FBI and we're talking about how they obtain the IGG, it's kind of unclear to me where that comes into play. It doesn't sound like, from what we're being told, that the IGG led in any way to Brian Kohlberger. Because when we read this one line in the PCA, it says, on November 25th, MPD asked area law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for a white Hyundai Elantra in the area. On November 29th, 2022, at approximately 12:28 a.m., Washington State University WSU police officer Daniel Tiengo queried an Elantra registered at WSU. As a result of a query, he located the 2015 white Hyundai Elantra and Pennsylvania license plate, blah, blah, blah. This vehicle was registered to Brian Kohlberger, hereafter Kohlberger, a resident of blah, 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 blah apartments in Pullman, Washington. The same day, at approximately 12:58, WSU officer Curtis Whitman was looking at a white Elantra and located the 2015 white Hyundai Elantra. Same one. They list the address. Officer Whitman also ran the car and returned Kohlberger with a Washington tag. I reviewed Kohlberger's Washington State driver's license information paragraph, and his license indicates that Kohlberger's was a white male. Additionally, the student, Officer Whitman, in addition, a student. Officer Whitman also ran the car and returned as Kohlberger with a Washington tag. I reviewed Kohlberger's Washington State driver's license. The license indicates the Kohlberger was a white male of height of 6 feet and 185 pounds. Additionally, the photograph of Kohlberger shows he has bushy eyebrows. Kohlberger's physical description is consistent with the description the DM saw on the King Road house. So this all happened on November 25th. Clearly, the PCA is stating that they came to Kohlberger through these tips from WSU. So this is what I'm asking you. When the FBI called from Pennsylvania to say, hey, we've got your guy. We ran this genetic information. This is his name. This is who we are. Go see if you can find some probable cause against this guy. Did MPD turn to the FBI and go, wow, we've been investigating this tip from WSU. We didn't tell you about it or tell you his name, but we've been investigating. This is so confusing to me because it's like, okay, what happened when the FBI called with that name from the IGG? Did the lead investigator then turn to the FBI and go, oh, amazing. We were just researching this same guy. He's been on our suspect list and we just tracked his cell phone data and found he was in the area. Like, what happened with MPD? Did they call the FBI and let them know they had a suspect? And vice versa with the FBI. When they called MPD, was MPD like, hey, we have the same guy on our radar. Amazing. There had to have been a perfect storm where they both found his name in two different circumstantial ways, or there's something else we don't understand about this. Another thing is the FBI found the match around the 19th or 20th. So why didn't the FBI alert the lead investigator for like 3 or 4 days? Why was it a secret? I mean, they had already been waiting for the results to the genetic genealogy. So why didn't they call him immediately? For question, and then when they did know, why didn't they call Brian Kohlberger in for questioning like they did all of the other suspects they cleared? Why didn't they ask him for a sample of his DNA? Instead, they went and got DNA out of the trash, which could bring up curtilage or property or privacy rights when it comes to your constitutional rights in illegal search and seizures. But I will also say the biggest and most perplexing parallel investigation in all of this evidence collected, for me, is the 71 federal grand jury subpoenas that were requested, we heard about in the May 30th hearing. So this means BK was investigated for something very big and very secret. The federal level grand jury convened after Brian Kohlberger's arrest, and it's separate from the Idaho4 investigation. I mean, the question is, in this secret grand jury, what charges on the federal level are being alleged that BK was involved in? And also, in this hearing where the defense was requesting these subpoenas, it was also don't forget, that was also the first time we heard the defense proposing sanctions on the prosecution, which now we see coming into fruition. Nobody, and I mean nobody, knows what they're referring to. The only thing we've seen on paper, or that I've seen on a federal level, involving BK, was that he was involved at a master's levels at DeSales on the dean's list, which means he qualified for and very likely was in the Homeland Security program. Now, whether he did anything with Homeland Security after graduation, I mean, we wouldn't have any way of knowing, or we don't even want to give him credit for that if he didn't enroll in it. But I'm just saying there's a possibility there. And that's the only thing on paper I've ever seen that Brian Kohlberger is kind of connected on a federal or government level. But I do want to end on one last note. Now, when it comes to the grand jury, what the prosecution provided to the defense was the scope of these subpoenas. They provided the evidence they retrieved, but they did not and would not give over the subpoenas. And the defense's argument is, we need to know these dates. We need to know how you got to our client. When it comes to these hearings and when we found out about these subpoenas, Corporal Brett Payne, the lead investigator, took the stand, and we heard the name of a specific FBI agent. His name was Nick Balance. Unbeknownst to Corporal Payne, under oath on the stand, we learned that this particular FBI agent voluntarily handed over his personal text messages to Ann Taylor in regards to the cell phone data tracking of Brian Koberger. We also learned in the same hearing from expert witness Cy Ray that Brian Koberger's cell phone data appeared to be exculpatory. So what do you think about that? Like, did the FBI agent just try to help out the defense? Or, as some have suggested in my comments, was this done to help the court so they don't have to subpoena the private text messages of an FBI agent? But I think the real question is, within the scope of the work that the FBI provided to MPD, like, what part of that would the FBI's personal text messages be necessary? Nick Balance apparently did the mapping and the tracking of Brian Koberger's phone number. What would his text messages have anything to do with that? So, and these were direct text messages to Corporal Payne, who was on the stand. One of the comments made by Ann Taylor when she presented these to Corporal Payne was, "I don't want to admit these into evidence." So I don't know. It's very interesting, you guys. What do you think of the secret investigations? And I'm sure I've missed a couple. And I've definitely not gone over all the secret investigations. So please leave down below some of the more mysterious parts of this case that you feel. And who knows, maybe I'll talk about them in one of my videos. So I don't know what all of this means, but I'm just trying to objectively present this information to you so you can do with it what you need to do. So if you've made it this far into this video, I ask nothing of you. I just appreciate you taking the time to listen to what I had to say. If you did like this content, I would be honored if you subscribe to my channel. I try to put out content daily. And other than that, I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in, and peace. So there is one other last thought I want to end with when it comes to Corporal Brett Payne. I have a subscriber who was doing some documentation on the MPD Facebook page, and she went back to retrieve some information on Corporal Payne about a week ago, and his name had been completely taken off of the Facebook page, along with references to him. And that kind of made a lot of us kind of raise our eyebrows about it, particularly since we knew this paperwork was coming out. There were sanctions and this subpoena ducis tecum being presented. Is Corporal Payne gone, or is it just coincidence? I will also point out that on the MPD website, the roster of police has been taken down for quite a while, and we only see a couple here and there. Corporal Payne isn't one of them. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.